What if the only chains holding you back were invisible, not made of iron, not locked by anyone else's hand, but crafted silently inside your mind? The fear of rejection. Think about how many times you hesitated, how many words you swallowed, how many doors you never knocked on, not because you weren't capable, but because you were terrified of being told no. The fear of rejection doesn't just keep you safe from embarrassment. It keeps you small, it keeps you silent, and it convinces you that love, opportunity, and freedom are things you must beg for. But here's the truth. Rejection is not a death sentence. It's a mirror. A mirror showing you what isn't meant for you, what doesn't belong in your hands, what would only weigh you down if you forced it. And the moment you stop treating rejection as an executioner and start seeing it as a redirect, everything changes. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing. You stop editing yourself just to be acceptable. You begin to understand that the fear of rejection was never about them. It was always about you believing you weren't enough. And when that fear collapses, so does everything that once controlled you. From the moment we are born, we are trained to seek approval. A baby learns that smiling earns affection, that crying earns attention, and that silence often earns disapproval. As we grow, this silent system of reward and punishment expands into school, friendships, and work. We are taught, without ever being told directly, that to be accepted is to survive. This lesson burrows deep into our psychology, shaping every interaction, every ambition, every fear. By the time we reach adulthood, the idea is already ingrained. Rejection means you are unworthy, unlovable, and inadequate. It becomes not just an external event, but an internal wound, one that whispers in the quiet moments when no one else is around. And because this fear is so primal, so tied to our sense of belonging, it has the power to paralyze us. It makes us second-guess our words before they are spoken, our choices before they are ever attempted. We believe rejection is something to be avoided at all costs, as though its presence will reduce us, erase us, and confirm our deepest suspicion that we are not enough. What most people do not realize is that the very fear of rejection is what diminishes them, not the rejection itself. When we hesitate to take risks, when we censor our truth, when we dilute who we are to fit into molds crafted by others, we are already rejecting ourselves before anyone else gets the chance to. This is the tragedy of living under the misconception that acceptance equals worth. It makes us betray our own authenticity in exchange for fleeting nods of approval. The irony is that even when those approvals arrive, they rarely fill the emptiness left behind by abandoning who we really are. They soothe us momentarily but never heal us. And so we live like actors on a stage, hoping the audience claps, never realizing that the performance itself has cost us our soul. The misconception blinds us to the truth. Rejection from others is never as painful as the rejection we silently inflict upon ourselves by refusing to live honestly. Philosophers and thinkers have long warned about the fragility of building life upon the acceptance of others. Machiavelli suggested that it is safer to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both, because fear does not waver as easily as affection. What he implied, though often misunderstood, was that depending on the love of others makes you vulnerable, unstable, and exposed to betrayal. Love, when tethered to approval, is a shaky foundation upon which to build your sense of self. It can be withdrawn at any moment, and when it is, your entire identity collapses if it was built on that foundation. Emotional maturity begins when you see rejection not as a strike against your value, but as an inevitable collision between two realities, yours and theirs. Sometimes those realities fit, and sometimes they don't. Their no is not a declaration of your insufficiency. Their disinterest does not hollow you out unless you let it. But as long as you remain chained to the misconception, you interpret every misalignment as proof that you are broken, rather than seeing it as a simple mismatch of paths. This misconception is sustained by society itself, because a population addicted to approval is easy to control. Look around and you'll notice how deeply the need for validation is woven into our systems. Social media thrives on likes and comments, turning human beings into numbers, measuring self-worth in algorithms. Education systems reward obedience more than curiosity, grading compliance instead of independent thought. Even workplaces often promote those who conform to the culture rather than those who challenge it. In all these structures, rejection is positioned as punishment and approval as reward, and so we internalize the lie. To be approved of is to succeed, and to be rejected is to fail. This narrative robs people of their freedom long before they even realize it, making them prisoners of perceptions that were never theirs to begin with. They end up fearing rejection as though it were the end of their existence, not recognizing that this fear is a crafted illusion designed to keep them tame, predictable, and silent. When you operate under this misconception, you begin to shrink your world. You apply for fewer opportunities because you can't bear another unanswered email. You silence your truth in relationships because you dread abandonment. You hold back your creativity because you fear criticism. You stop before you even begin, convincing yourself that rejection is unbearable, forgetting that in reality it is simply feedback from life, an arrow pointing you elsewhere. This self-censorship slowly suffocates the soul. It is not rejection that keeps you small, but your fear of it. The opportunities you lose are not because others denied you, but because you denied yourself the chance to be seen. And in this shrinking, you start to live a half-life, existing in shadows rather than stepping fully into the light of your own existence. The misconception doesn't just prevent you from growing, it convinces you that staying small is safer, when in truth it is the most dangerous thing you could do. Yet, if you examine rejection closely, you begin to see how deceptive your fear truly is. Rejection is not the annihilation we imagine. It does not strip us of our essence, nor does it alter our true value. It simply redraws the lines of possibility. A person's refusal, a closed door, a missed chance. All of these are external events. They may bruise your pride, they may sting your ego, but they cannot touch the core of who you are. Only your interpretation can do that. Only by agreeing with the misconception that rejection equals worthlessness do you allow those moments to wound you deeply. Without that agreement, rejection is neutral. It is a signpost, not a scar. It says not here, or not with them, or not in this way. But it never says, not you. The misconception distorts this reality, turning every closed door into an existential verdict, when in truth it is nothing more than a redirection toward where you actually belong. The weight of this misconception is heavy because it often masquerades as truth. When someone you loved leaves, it feels personal. When a job you wanted chooses another, it feels like an insult. When your voice is unheard, it feels like invisibility. The pain is real, but the interpretation is flawed. You think you are unloved, unworthy, unseen, when in reality you are simply misaligned with that particular person, that particular opportunity, that particular moment. But because we are conditioned to equate approval with existence, we collapse under these rejections as though our identity itself has been denied. The misconception convinces us that our value is external, negotiable, and fragile, when in fact it has always been internal, steady, and unshaken. This is why the fear of rejection can dominate a life, because as long as you believe this lie, every no feels like an attack on your very being, rather than just a redirection of your path. Everyone carries memories of rejection that feel like bruises on the soul. You remember the job interview you thought went perfectly until the call never came. You remember the person whose eyes once lit up when they saw you, only to one day look through you as if you were invisible. You remember friendships that faded, invitations that never arrived, and moments when silence was louder than any answer could have been. In those moments, rejection feels like a verdict, like the world itself has whispered that you are not enough. And yet, if you trace those same memories from where you stand now, you can often see how they shaped you. The job you didn't get forced you onto a different path, one where you developed resilience, where you discovered new talents, where you built something entirely your own. The person who left gave you the gift of solitude, the chance to meet yourself without distraction. What once felt like destruction often reveals itself as redirection, though it rarely feels that way in the moment it is happening. The pain is real, but so too is the transformation hidden within it. Think about heartbreak. In the beginning, it tears you open, leaving you raw and exposed. You replay conversations, search for what you could have done differently, and measure your worth against someone else's choice to walk away. You imagine that if only you had been smarter, more attractive, more interesting, the rejection would not have happened. But over time, something shifts. You begin to realize that rejection was not proof of your insufficiency. but simply evidence of misalignment. The person who left could not see you in the way you needed to be seen, could not love you in the way you deserved to be loved, and while it hurt, their absence cleared the space for you to recognize your own value, a value that does not depend on whether or not they stayed. Heartbreak teaches you that survival is possible even when the thing you feared most, the loss of love, has already happened. And once you know you can survive, you begin to live less fearfully. That is transformation. Or consider failure in the realm of ambition. You put yourself forward for a role, a project, an opportunity, and you hear the dreaded word, no. At first, the rejection feels like confirmation that you are not capable. But years later, when you look back, you realize that the closed door forced you to find another way. Some of the most celebrated innovators, artists, and thinkers carry stories of rejection, so numerous they could fill books. They were told they lacked the talent, the intelligence, the potential. Yet every rejection pushed them further into discovery, into sharpening their craft, into resilience that could not have been born in comfort. Rejection became their teacher, shaping them more than any success ever could. And though you may not realize it in your own story, the same principle applies. The moments you were denied are often the moments that planted the seeds of your eventual transformation, even if at the time they felt like endings. There is also the quieter kind of rejection, the one that comes not from others but from the silence of the world. You pour your heart into something, an idea, a creation, a piece of art, and no one notices. No applause, no recognition, just emptiness. It is easy to mistake that silence for failure, to believe that your effort was meaningless because no one validated it. But silence too can be a form of transformation. It teaches you to ask yourself why you create, why you try, why you speak. Do you do it for approval, or do you do it because the act itself matters? When the world is silent, you are given the chance to find the deeper reasons behind your actions. And in that discovery, you build a foundation that cannot be shaken by the opinions of others. The rejection of indifference becomes the birthplace of authenticity. Rejection in friendships often carries a unique sting. We imagine friendships will last forever, that those who once laughed with us will always walk beside us. But time shifts people, and sometimes they drift away without explanation. At first it feels like abandonment, as though something is wrong with you. But when you reflect years later, you often see that those endings made space for other connections, deeper ones, truer ones. The rejection of being left behind often clears the way for you to walk your own path, to outgrow environments that no longer nourish your soul. Friendships that ended taught you independence. They taught you that your worth is not measured by how many people surround you, but by how deeply you can stand with yourself. And though you may not have seen it at the time, those losses gave you the chance to transform loneliness into solitude, and solitude into strength. There is also the rejection you face when you dare to be different. Maybe you spoke an unpopular truth. Maybe you lived in a way others didn't understand. Maybe you refused to conform. The world doesn't always reward authenticity. Often it punishes it. You may have been mocked, criticized, or dismissed for daring to stand apart. And in those moments it hurt. You may have wished to be invisible, to blend in, to be accepted. But over time you realize that rejection for being who you are is not the same as rejection of who you are. It is merely a reflection of others' discomfort with what they cannot control or categorize. And while it may isolate you in the beginning, eventually it becomes the very reason you attract the right people, the right opportunities, the right life. Rejection for authenticity becomes the crucible through which your truest self emerges, and that is a transformation worth every wound. Finally, consider the rejection that comes not from others, but from yourself. The moments you look in the mirror and wish to be someone else, the times you silence your own desires because you fear they are too much, too strange, too unrealistic. Self-rejection is the most devastating form of rejection, because it denies you before the world even has a chance. But it also holds the key to transformation. When you recognize that you have been complicit in your own diminishment, you are faced with a choice. Continue living under that shadow, or begin the slow, painful, beautiful process of accepting yourself. Every external rejection is survivable once you stop rejecting yourself. Because when you finally say yes to who you are, the no of others loses its power. And in that moment, rejection is no longer a curse, but a catalyst. No longer an ending, but the very beginning of your becoming. There comes a moment in life when the noise begins to fade, when the desperate chase for approval no longer burns with the same urgency, and in the quiet that follows, something unexpected emerges. Your own voice. At first it is faint, hesitant, buried beneath years of conditioning, but the more you listen, the clearer it becomes. This is the beginning of awakening, the slow realization that strength is not something given by others, nor something earned by meeting expectation. It is something you already carried, hidden beneath layers of fear. The fear of rejection had always been a wall, and the moment you stop fearing it, you realize the wall was made of glass, transparent, fragile, easily broken. You see through it now. You see that beyond rejection lies freedom, and beyond fear lies clarity. It feels like stepping into sunlight after years underground, and though the brightness stings your eyes at first, you know you are finally seeing. This awakening feels strange, even unsettling, because you are stepping into a kind of solitude that once terrified you. You used to think that being alone meant being unwanted, unworthy, unseen. But now you begin to understand that solitude is not a prison, it is a sanctuary. In silence, you are not diminished, you are expanded. In stillness, you are not forgotten, you are found. The very moments you once avoided, those long hours with only yourself for company, become the forge in which strength is created. You realize that your value does not collapse in the absence of others. You are not validated by the presence of an audience, you are validated by the fact that you exist, that you endure, that you continue. Solitude stops being punishment and starts being proof of your resilience. Your scars too begin to look different. For years you hid them, ashamed of what they revealed about your failures, your heartbreaks, your losses. You saw them as evidence of being broken, but awakening allows you to see them for what they truly are, reminders that you have survived. Each scar is a map of where you've been, a testament that rejection did not destroy you, even when it felt like it might. They are not symbols of weakness but of endurance, of strength forged under pressure. And as you trace them with new eyes, you realize they have made you stronger than any unscarred version of you could ever be. You would not erase them now, because they are proof that you can endure, and endurance is the deepest form of power. Awakening also changes the way you carry yourself. You begin to speak with a voice that no longer trembles with fear of disapproval. You walk into rooms without bending your back under the weight of needing to be chosen. You no longer apologize for existing too loudly or too differently. This strength is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the quiet confidence of knowing you are enough, whether or not the world acknowledges it. It is an unshakable calm, like a tree rooted deeply enough that storms can shake its branches but never uproot it. You may still feel pain when rejected, but it no longer defines you. The sting passes, but your center remains unmoved. This steadiness is freedom. And with this freedom comes clarity. You begin to see that much of what you once desired was never truly yours. The doors that closed, the people who left, the opportunities that slipped away, none of them were designed for the person you are becoming. Awakening allows you to stop clinging to them, to stop begging for space in places where your soul does not belong. You start to realize that rejection often clears the path toward what was always meant for you. Inner strength sharpens your vision, and what once felt like loss now feels like release. It is like carrying heavy chains for years, only to finally let them fall. You feel lighter, freer, more open to the truth that your worth is not tied to what you gain, but to what you are, even when you have nothing. This inner strength does not roar. It hums quietly beneath everything you do. It is not the kind of power that needs to announce itself because it does not depend on recognition. It shows itself in subtle ways, in the calm with which you handle disappointment, in the patience you bring to uncertainty, in the peace you feel even when no one claps for you. This is a strength that cannot be taken, because it was never given by anyone else in the first place. It belongs solely to you. And when you taste it, even once, you can never go back to the person who lived only for acceptance. You have glimpsed your own wholeness, and that vision cannot be undone. Ultimately, awakening feels like returning home, not to a place, but to yourself. It is the moment you realize that every fear of rejection was only a shadow obscuring the truth of your being. You are not fragile glass that shatters at the first no. You are stone, shaped by years of wind and water, standing stronger because of the forces that once tried to erode you. Inner strength is not about never being hurt. It is about knowing that pain will not unmake you. Awakening is the birth of this realization, that your worth was never on trial, that no rejection can erase it, and that everything you need to stand unbroken has been within you all along. When you stop fearing rejection, the world doesn't suddenly soften its edges. People will still walk away, doors will still close, and silence will still follow your attempts at being heard. But what changes is the weight you place upon those moments. You no longer interpret them as proof of your inadequacy, but as evidence of alignment or misalignment. The awakening shifts your gaze from obsession with outcomes to appreciation of the process. You realize that much of your suffering was not caused by rejection itself, but by the meaning you attached to it. When the no arrives, you no longer collapse under it, because you no longer believe it erases you. You begin to stand firmly in the truth that your existence requires no external validation. You start to understand that rejection does not shrink your worth. It merely redirects your path, and this realization is not just liberating, it is revolutionary. It changes how you move, how you dream, how you love. This revolution is subtle. It does not announce itself with applause or fireworks. It lives in the quiet ways you no longer betray yourself. It shows up when you stop editing your voice to sound more acceptable. It emerges when you write, create, or speak without asking whether it will please anyone. It takes root when you love someone, not because you hope they'll love you back, but because love itself is worth giving. The absence of fear creates a space where authenticity can finally breathe. And in that space you discover what freedom really means. Freedom is not having everyone's approval. It is needing none. The revolution happens within, unseen by the world but felt deeply in every step you take. And once it begins, you no longer live as a prisoner of perception. You live as someone unbound, someone whole, someone unshaken by whether the world nods or turns away. In this space, you also begin to see the illusions for what they are. You recognize how much of society is built on the currency of approval, likes, followers, applause, recognition. You see how entire industries thrive on your fear of being left out, unnoticed, unseen. But now you carry a clarity that pierces through the noise. You understand that what they call success is often dependency disguised as achievement, and what they call failure is often the first step into independence. The moment you stop fearing rejection, their game loses its power over you. You no longer measure yourself against standards you did not set. You no longer beg for entry into rooms that were never designed to hold you. You no longer trade your peace for applause. Instead, you begin to walk toward places that feel aligned with your essence, even if they are lonelier, quieter, less celebrated. You walk differently now, not to be seen, but because you finally see yourself. Rejection, once feared, now becomes a companion. It becomes a kind of guide that saves you from wasting your life on what isn't yours. When a person leaves, you grieve, but you also understand they were not meant to walk the full length of your path. When an opportunity slips away, you pause, but you also recognize that life is carving a space for something more fitting, something truer. Each rejection ceases to feel like a wall and begins to feel like a signpost. It whispers, "Not here, not now, not this way." And because you no longer see it as destruction, you stop resisting its wisdom. You allow it to move you, to redirect you, to refine you. In this way, rejection stops being the enemy of your growth and becomes the teacher of it. And when you learn to listen, you discover that every no holds within it a deeper yes. A yes to your becoming, to your unfolding, to your strength. This strength is not loud. It does not need to stand on stages or be recognized in headlines. It lives in the ordinary moments that once terrified you. It lives in speaking your truth even if no one claps. It lives in taking a risk even if no one believes in you. It lives in walking away from places where you are not valued, not because you are bitter, but because you finally respect yourself. This strength transforms rejection from something that wounds you into something that shapes you. This strength transforms rejection from something that wounds you into something that shapes you. You see now that the people who could not love you, the doors that would not open, the dreams that crumbled, they all played their part in carving out the person you are now. And with every scar, every silence, every refusal, you became more unshakable. The revolution you once thought would come from being accepted by the world arrives instead from being accepted by yourself. And that is the only acceptance that can never be taken away. So the real revolution is not outward but inward, not in convincing the world to finally recognize you, but in no longer needing recognition to exist fully. Not in erasing rejection from your life, but in transforming your relationship to it. When you stop fearing rejection, you stop bargaining with your worth. You stop auditioning for places that cannot hold your truth. You stop begging to be seen and begin seeing yourself. This is the quiet power, the kind that does not need to shout, the kind that does not crumble when silence follows. And in the stillness of that realization, you hear the most important truth of all. Your worth was never up for negotiation. It was never theirs to give or take. It was always yours, waiting for you to stop running, to stop fearing, to finally return home to yourself.